he's I would say, is his take wrong? Like, I think that I disagree with his take on Bitcoin. And at the same time, I think that I understand why he's taking the take that he's taking. That's a lot of takes in one sentence.
Yeah, it's like the king says the king is good. Well, obviously that's what you're going to say if you're the king, right?
Exactly.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to yet another episode of Zillennial Money. This is episode 19, if I'm not mistaken. So we're keeping the train going, and there are no breaks on this train. As always, I am the world's greatest podcast host. My name is Andy. And for those audience members who might be new, why don't you guys introduce yourselves as well?
Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Dominic here. So be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel as well as our Clips channel. And awesome, let's do it.
Hey guys, it's Tristan. We've got a pretty packed docket for you this session, so I'll send it back to Andy to take it away.
Yeah, always Tristan with the signature tagline. We do have a packed docket. He did not lie. So without further ado, let's jump into today's stories. So right off the bat, first story, you guys are going to be super interested in this one, I think, hot off the press. And this is the ETF, Ethereum Spot ETF news, of course. So right before this show started, we did get the news that the SEC has approved all 8 of the pending spot Ethereum ETF applications. So this is going to be a thing imminently. I'm not sure if they can get it listed tomorrow or at the latest, it'll be trading live next week. So this comes off the back where the SEC first approved spot Bitcoin ETFs back in January. And if you guys remember back then, the SEC chairman, Gary Gensler, he was super anti any other crypto ETFs, right? It was like, we're going to approve Bitcoin, but this is just because we think that Bitcoin is a commodity, and we've always said that. But all the other ones, it's like it was a hard no. So back then, back in January, I was super pessimistic on any other ETFs potentially getting approved, just because ETFs for other cryptocurrencies. I mean, just because Gary Gensler seems super hostile towards it, and I was very bearish on the chances of an Ethereum ETF. But it seems like just within a matter of like 2 weeks, the SEC did a complete 180. And, it was, I think, the Bloomberg analyst, who's like the primary guy that keeps track of all this ETF news. His name is Eric Balchunas. I follow him on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. You guys should all follow him if you are interested in this kind of stuff. But Balchunas was saying, I think he was saying that there was only a 25% chance that the ETF was going to get approved in May, which was the first wave of like final deadlines for the pending Ethereum ETF deadlines. But just a week ago, he suddenly, out of nowhere, just updated his chances to a 75% chance. And then we started hearing rumors that the SEC was requesting for comments on these forms called the 19B4 filings, which is just a form that you have to fill out before you, when you submit an ETF application. So the SEC asked for comments, and then, the ball started rolling really fast. And then, I think by the time that today rolled around, even before the day ended today, in my mind, there was like a 95% chance that this was going to get approved, because we saw all the signs that it was going to get approved. And sure enough, right before this show started, it was confirmed that it was approved. So I just shared some of the screenshots of just relevant tweets that I thought was interesting. So, Shibatoshi Nakamoto is, I think his name is Billy. His real name is Billy Marquez. He's one of the founders of Dogecoin, one of the inventors of Dogecoin. And he said, the SEC a month ago, Ethereum is a security and we won't ever approve a spot ETF. And then the SEC a week ago is like, Ethereum is a security, we won't ever approve a spot Bitcoin, spot Ethereum ETF. And the SEC today is like, hey, by the way, you guys update your update your forms because this is happening. And then I commented on that. And this is kind of just like my opinion on maybe what has transpired. And I wanted to maybe get you guys' thoughts on it too. But what I think really happened was another piece of news, which was Trump coming out in support of crypto last week. Yeah, basically, I think this was, I'm going to see if I can find a clip of that. But basically, Trump was at a campaign rally and somebody asked him about crypto. And then, Trump, knowing that the Biden administration and the Democrats are mostly against crypto, he was like, okay, I'm going to be like for crypto. I'm going to like make America be a place where crypto people want to be. Right. Basically, he wasn't like super enthusiastic about it. He was just like, I'm fine with crypto. Like, I'm not going to crack down on it. I'm just fine with it. Like he didn't like fully endorse it, but I think even that was enough to maybe scare the Democrats into like being a little bit less harsh on crypto, just because, as I said, I tweeted another tweet a while ago that around 15 to 20% of Americans own crypto, according to the latest studies. So, in my opinion, that is probably because Biden didn't want to, unnecessarily piss off the people that own crypto. So, this is kind of like what I responded to Shibatoshi was, you forgot the most important part that came between SEC a week ago and SEC today, which was Trump saying, I'm kind of fine with crypto. And that's all it took, right? And just to drive home the point a little bit further, this is Slum Doge Millionaire, and I believe that this is the Dogecoin millionaire guy, if you guys remember him from last cycle, where he like took out a bunch of lines of credit and stuff like that and went all in on Dogecoin, and then at peak his portfolio was worth $1 million, and he only put in like $20,000 or something like that. But I don't think he probably isn't a millionaire anymore, considering that Dogecoin has fallen quite a bit since the peak. But hey, like Dogecoin has gone up substantially as well recently, so maybe he'll be a millionaire again soon. But in any case, he tweeted, it's like, hey, I might have to vote for Trump this time. And this is in response to Donald Trump's campaign saying that they will build a Bitcoin and crypto army to go against Joe Biden and the Democrats, whom, if you remember, Elizabeth Warren, who's a pretty big senator, pretty famous senator from the Democratic side, she campaigned for her reelection to the Senate on a message of building an anti-crypto army. So Trump is kind of, seizing upon that and saying that he's going to do the opposite of what Elizabeth Warren is doing. You can't say that this doesn't work, because the Slum Doge Millionaire guy, he seems like he's a pretty young guy, right? So usually young people tend to be more left-leaning, so they tend to be more likely to vote for Biden than Trump, I would say, in general, right? Obviously, there's a lot of exceptions. However, I just think that in general, it is true that young people are more left-leaning. So if Biden is super against crypto, then this has the potential to alienate a significant part of the population, and for no good reason too, right? It's not like Biden is really gaining anything, in my opinion, from being really harsh on crypto. Maybe he has like some donors from like big banks and stuff that might get pissed off. But yeah, I don't really see a benefit. But let me toss the question back to you guys, though. Maybe I've said too much of my opinion already. I don't want to poison you guys' thoughts, but let me toss the question back to you guys. Do you think that today's SEC decision to allow for Ethereum spot ETFs has anything to do with Trump changing his stance? And do you think that like Gary Gensler got an angry phone call from Biden to like change his stance or anything like that? Like, do you think to what degree is politics involved in today's decision, do you think?
like it could just be like completely coincidental. Like, and the fact of the matter, we truly don't know. But I think the coincidences are super close to each other. So I think there always is a slight possibility that I think Trump's interest in cryptocurrency is like a part of why that the Ethereum ETF like kind of sort of accelerated. And I guess in terms of his political campaign, that also could help him in term two as well, and then not help Biden so much. And if you're saying that Biden might be talking to a few people, and then those few people might like want to change his mind, like maybe Biden will come into a different shoulder from like left to right, so to speak. We don't know. I guess time will tell. And yeah, I think it's just really interesting what's going on right now. We've gone a pretty long way. Like before, there was like no Bitcoin ETFs or Ethereum ETFs, and then look at where we are now. It's pretty fascinating. I think Canada had some like Bitcoin ETFs before, but still, I think it's really fascinating, and it's only going to be better for us just because, of course, we're all in it. So the more the merrier, and to the moon, let's go.
Yeah, Canada, fun fact, Canada actually approved both Bitcoin spot ETFs and Ethereum spot ETFs at the same time back in, I think this was like summer of 2021. Yeah, I actually have like a little bit of both. I have more Bitcoin than Ethereum, but it's like I have a little bit of the Ethereum, the Canadian Ethereum ETF as well. Yeah, Tristan, your thoughts. To what extent do you think politics played a role here?
Yeah, I think that it's a pretty fair assessment that Trump basically being like, crypto is all right with me, and that having an impact on their decision. I think it's pretty fair to say that that's quite possible. I'm not 100% certain, obviously, but based on their kind of reaction and the quick turnaround with this, now Biden can go to the crypto bros. Hey, I allowed the Bitcoin ETF and the Ethereum ETF, right? So I'm with you guys. I'm on your side, right? To kind of alleviate some of that people leaning towards voting for Trump, in contrast because of the difference with the belief that maybe Trump is more pro crypto versus Biden, who's seemingly pretty anti crypto. But either way, Biden can go, oh, I allowed these ETFs. It's all not my contributions. So I think that there's probably some aspect to that. I'm not sure to what extent there is, but I think that's the important part. Yeah, I think, is there any other questions for that I missed?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just gonna make a comment because it's funny how like people were saying that Gary Gensler is like the most hostile SEC chairman towards crypto of all time, and everyone's like, crapping on Gensler for this and that, for suing Coinbase, suing Robinhood, suing like a bunch of crypto companies. But you can't deny that it was under Gensler that both the ETFs for Bitcoin and Ethereum were approved. So, maybe Gensler is not that bad after all. Like it's, people criticize him a lot, but it's under him that like crypto has progressed a lot in America, right? Now we have ETFs for both Bitcoin and Ethereum. So just another graphic actually that I want to share before we move on to the second part of this story is that, just to back up what I said earlier about, kind of crypto getting bipartisan support, right? So before we kind of talked about crypto in the sense that like Republicans are for it and Democrats are against it. Well, it seems like that is actually shifting and is like less of a case now than it was before. It's still like more Republicans support it than Democrats. But if you guys look at the next part, this was a vote on a bill called FIT21. I forgot what it stands for, but essentially it's like a regulatory framework that Coinbase and a bunch of other crypto companies are in support of, saying that it'll give the space more regulatory clarity. Basically, like the passage of this FIT Act would mean that like the United States would take a more regulatory approach, more like clearer regulatory approach to regulating crypto, and move farther away from the idea of having to like ban everything and prevent people from self-custodying all this stuff. So this was a bill that was heavily opposed by some Democrats who are in the, let's just say, Elizabeth Warren camp of anti-crypto army. I think one of the chief opponents was Republican or Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman, who's kind of the voice of the anti-crypto army in the House of Representatives, versus Elizabeth Warren is kind of the anti-crypto leader in the Senate. But anyways, regardless of their opposition of it, you can see the final tally. It was 136 nays and 276 yays. So and out of that 279 yays, it was 208 Republicans and 71 Democrats. So it's still more Democrats oppose it than was for it, but a lot of Democrats did cross the line and vote with the Republicans, which is kind of rare, right? Because like with these days, with the increased political divide, it's like you hardly see anything that's bipartisan anymore. But on giving crypto a clear regulatory framework, this bill did pass. So yeah, this just goes to show my point earlier, where I think that being anti-crypto is a dead end, right? Like you're gonna get voted out. You might not get voted out this election, and you might not get voted out next election, but if you continue down the pathway of being anti-crypto, you're going to get voted out eventually. And this is kind of what I was trying to say. Now, the second part of this story is that I wanted to talk about was, what do you guys think about the Ethereum ETF in general? Like, would this be something that you're interested in adding to your portfolio? Why or why not? What do you think is going to come after the Ethereum ETF, right? Because I've heard rumors that people are saying that, okay, after we get this done, then there might be a Solana ETF at some point, right? Or if we get a Solana ETF, what's to stop there from me a Dogecoin ETF? So do you think that this opens the floodgate to a bunch of other ETFs down the line? And lastly, what do you think it's gonna, like, do you think this will affect Bitcoin, right? Because I know we're mostly Bitcoin centric channel, but I do want to talk about kind of the whole space in general. So what do you think of the impact to the whole space when the spot Ethereum ETF is approved, as it just has been? And number two, do you think that this opens the door to other ETFs of other cryptocurrencies? And number three, are you interested in adding this product potentially to your portfolio?
I'm gonna go on and say, first and foremost, the vote for like the Senate vote was quite interesting. I think if you're like straying further and further away from like Bitcoin, I think you're at a loss. Honestly, like money talks, it looks like it's the situation here. So if you move towards the money, I think you'll be fine in a better place and you'll be okay. And I can't remember every single question, but I'll try to answer everything as much as possible. And if I miss anything, just like interrupt me, let me know. And in terms of my opinions of the Ethereum ETF and like what's to come with it, I think it's really cool. I think in a sense it does inevitably like provide opportunity for other potential like cryptocurrency ETFs. I can realistically see like Solana being the case. Like I actually do want Solana right now, but I don't own it currently just because I'm waiting for like another dip. I know arguably, I know Andy always says like, oh, you could probably buy it now. I think it's at a pretty reasonable price, but I don't know. I'll just wait a bit longer. I should be okay. Or maybe I won't. We'll see. I might regret it. Anyway, so as for like Dogecoin, I'm not exactly sure if that's going to happen anytime soon. I feel like it's a little trolly, but I mean, again, like I said before, if money talks, then I think all will be good. And then at the end, like inevitably, it'll be like pretty trolls, but it could be an ETF, like who knows. And if I myself am like interested in buying a Ethereum ETF, like I'm interested in buying another stock, which for retention, we're going to be talking about later. So be sure to tune into the end. We know what we're talking about because it's in the docket, but I'm not going to mention it quite yet. You're going to have to figure out by watching it to the end. I'm interested in investing into that stock specifically. So when I buy the stock that you don't know about and you have to watch to the end to find out, then I might transfer over to the Ethereum ETFs. But I don't know if I would buy the American one. If you were mentioning that there are Canadian versions, I think I would do that instead, just because I don't want to, or just because I don't want to get screwed over by conversion, currency conversion. But yeah, did I miss anything, or is that everything? Nice background, by the way. Thought I didn't mention that.
AI, that's a hint to that stock that Dom is gonna talk about later. Just AI, one word. Anyways, yeah. No, I think you mostly answered the question. Like,
Cool.
do you think that this, like, I guess maybe you could elaborate a little bit more, like, on what you think the impact is going to be on Bitcoin, and like, do you think that this is like a bullish thing for Bitcoin or not? Because like, I've heard arguments from both sides, right? Some people say that this is going to draw in more money to the space in general, and then people are gonna, like, maybe people are interested in Ethereum first, but then they get interested in Bitcoin after they come into the space. But some people are saying that, hey, like, especially the Bitcoin maxis, the people who don't like Ethereum are like, hey, this is a distraction. You're going to mislead people. And then, like, people are going to hold Ethereum and then they're going to lose money because the Bitcoin maxis think that Ethereum's going to crash. And then, it's going to leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And it's going to suck away attention and money from Bitcoin. Like which side do you think you're more on? Like, do you think that this is good for Bitcoin, or is it bad for Bitcoin that now we have a spot Ethereum ETF?
Well, like, in my honest opinion, I think it's fantastic for Bitcoin, and here's kind of why. So, let's just like go to like the stock market and then come back. So like with the stock market, I think generally you would want more retail investors to be investing into the stock market on top of like hedge funds and whatnot. I think the more exposure to the stock market and the more people investing to the stock market and the more economic flow of the market, it is better inevitably in the end. So it's the same thing for cryptocurrency. So like, let's say, for example, this Ethereum ETF is out. That's kind of like the step up on the staircase for people to get slightly more exposure to cryptocurrency. If they get more slightly into the whole cryptocurrency space, they might do a little bit of research perhaps and then venture into more like cryptocurrencies. Let's say they start with Ethereum, maybe they'll go to Bitcoin or other way around. I think it just generally promotes more growth, and then more exposure, the more people, more like flow into the cryptocurrency space. So I think it's definitely a good thing, and I see it doing well in the future for sure. So
yeah, all fair points. Tristan, you want to add your thoughts to this?
Yeah, so I'll jump in here on that topic right off the bat, because I think that it's definitely something that is more bullish for Bitcoin in general. And basically my thought process is similar to what Dominic was saying with like how more people getting involved in the space. Maybe they start with Ethereum, but then do additional research and opt to swap to Bitcoin in the end. Because I think that, a lot of the time Bitcoin looks really expensive. So going for Bitcoin right off the bat is really hard to justify when you're starting out. You're like, you look at one of the cheaper ones and you go, oh, okay, I'll try doing that one. And you don't, and I feel like a lot of people don't want to go with the least like super unknown ones. So with Ethereum being kind of the cheaper alternative to Bitcoin at a glance, I think a lot of people will start with Ethereum and then move to Bitcoin. And part of my reason for this belief is that's basically what I did. Was that when I started buying cryptocurrencies, I basically bought Ethereum and basically no Bitcoin. And then over time, I flipped to basically no Ethereum. Actually, at this point, I have functionally zero Ethereum. And
I've met
everything is Bitcoin.
I bet a lot of people heard that like initial part and it's like shame. The Bitcoin maxis, you just like pissed off a bunch of them. But the second was good, so you saved it.
I was just gonna say, well, they can come for me because I flipped completely. I think Ethereum's kind of a shit coin. So I'm not gonna lie. That kind of flows into my thought process for the ETF, which is I will not be adding it to my portfolio because I think from my perspective, Bitcoin. I tend to be more in the Bitcoin maxi school of thought. In that Bitcoin is the only one that's really worth anything. Every other coin is to some extent a shit coin, and because of that fact, in my opinion, Ethereum is a shit coin. And so purchasing and holding the Ethereum ETF, what's the value that I'm going to get from it? Because long term, in my opinion, I'd be better off holding Bitcoin or Bitcoin related stuff in basically every scenario than holding what I believe is basically, garbage and or valueless. So, and I know this is a little bit aggressive. I know that people think that like Ethereum and stuff, you've got like NFTs and all that, but like I don't think that I don't think they're particularly valuable. And until Ethereum really has a differentiator than Bitcoin, that's not just basically that a core or a foundation controls a lot of the information, a lot of the updates and everything, and that they're doing staking and stuff. Like it's basically, in my opinion, Ethereum is not something that I really get a lot of value from or see a lot of value within. And so that kind of is why I'm pretty not anti, but like I'm not going to buy the the Ethereum ETF because it just doesn't jive with my thought process. And maybe the Ethereum ETF will perform really well and have a great time. That wouldn't even surprise me. I would be perfectly fine with the ETF doing well. It's just not something that I'm going to buy when I have Bitcoin and other Bitcoin alternatives to purchase. And so flowing into the last question on that one, do I think that this is kind of a gateway to other cryptocurrencies becoming a ETF also, such as Solana, which I would think would be the most likely next candidate? And I think in that case, yes. I think that it's pretty hard to come up with a strong argument as to why Ethereum is a commodity and Solana isn't, because everything Ethereum does, Solana basically also does. Every piece of value, with the exception of like some of the Ethereum specific stuff. Which again, I don't think is what has determined that Ethereum is a commodity for the sake of the ETF. So in that regard, I feel like this is very much like they've opened the floodgates for other cryptocurrencies, because as kind of my opinion, kind of flowing from the more Bitcoin maxi school of thought, is that since basically every other coin, in my opinion, is kind of a shit coin. So, for example, even Solana is a shit coin, in my opinion. The fact that they've allowed an ETF to exist for a shit coin in the first place, basically, like for me, there's a difference between Bitcoin itself and Ethereum and its magnitudes, right? And since they've allowed the different one, if they've done just Bitcoin, I could see them preventing all of the other shit coins. But by allowing one of the shit coins to go through, they've now opened the floodgates for all of the other ones to be considered in the same route. And so, in my opinion, that's basically what they've done. And to be clear, it's not me saying that you shouldn't own other cryptocurrencies. My thought process is more so like you can trade other cryptocurrencies. You want to play other cryptocurrencies, that's your decision. None of this is financial advice, but in my opinion, for the long-term future hold, the Bitcoin is something that I think has an inherent value to it, and every other coin does not. And because of that fact, every other coin is at best going to be a trading tool. And so with that in mind, I'd be perfectly happy if they released a Solana ETF because I personally have some Solana and I would love to offload that at a good price. And that kind of covers my hot take central.
No, you know what? Like, I actually agree with like almost all of what you like 95% of what you just said. And for me, I know like people tend to think of me as a Bitcoin maxi as well, but I don't really think of it that way. I focus the majority of my time on Bitcoin specifically. But again, I hold Solana, I hold some Solana, not as much as I hold Bitcoin. I hold some Ethereum, again, not as much Bitcoin, as my like Solana position is smaller than my Bitcoin position, right? But yeah, I just think of it from a capitalist perspective, right? Like it's like what has the potential to make more money in like a short to medium term, right? Like it's more like I guess if you want to call it a trader's mentality, then you could call it that too. But I'm kind of like just thinking about it in terms of like the Bitcoin cycles, right? So every cycle, every 4-year cycle, Bitcoin makes its bull run, and then usually Bitcoin leads the pack. But then altcoins eventually catch up, and then these other altcoins or shit coins, as Tristan so endearly put it, they tend to outperform Bitcoin in like there's a period of time where these coins outperform Bitcoin, right? So that's kind of the upside that I'm trying to capture. And I agree with what Tristan said earlier, is that I think only Bitcoin is worth holding for the long term, like in between cycles, and then all the other coins that like tend to outperform Bitcoin. Well, they won't. I don't think they'll outperform Bitcoin in the long term. So I'll be looking to sell them as well before the cycle is done. But in terms of Ethereum, I just looked at my Bitcoin and Ethereum bag in my cold storage. I won't tell you how much is in there or what the prices are that I bought them for, but let me just tell you that the percentage gain on my Ethereum position is right now, at least, is bigger than the percentage gain on my Bitcoin position for the coins that I have in cold storage. Now you can make an argument that like when did you exactly buy the Ethereum and when did you exactly buy the Bitcoin? Because like your entry prices matter, right? Because maybe like you just bought Bitcoin at a bad time when it already started running up, and you just so happened to buy Ethereum at a low price, so that's why you're up more on Ethereum. But you can always make these arguments, and I haven't like researched it that deep into when exactly I made what decision. But I'm just telling you, right now, as of May of 2024, for the coins, I think I started stacking back in 2020. So, throughout 2020 and 2021, the coins that I have stacked, I'm up more on my Ethereum position than I am on Bitcoin. So, this is kind of maybe a plus for Ethereum because it does have the potential to outperform Bitcoin, at least in the short to medium term, right? And this is why I hold Ethereum. I hold some, again, not as much Bitcoin, not as much, I hold less Ethereum than I hold Bitcoin. But this is just, this is just my opinion. So anyways, why don't we actually move on to the second story? Because this second story is actually somewhat related to the first story as well. So this segment I like to call shit that Bitcoin maxis are mad about. And you'll soon see why. Okay, so the first part of this story is, of course, Bitcoin Pizza Day. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the lore, but May 22nd of every year is what's called Bitcoin Pizza Day. And it's a holiday that is meant to commemorate the first ever transaction made with Bitcoin. So I believe this happened in 2010, where this man that you see pictured, his name is Laszlo Heinitz, and he bought 2 pizzas with 10,000 Bitcoins. So if you guys do the math on 10,000 Bitcoins, that's a lot of money right now, right? But back then, 10,000 Bitcoins was only worth 2 pizzas. So Yeah, could you imagine like having 10,000 bitcoins back then and like spending it on pizza? But apparently he's not upset about it. He's like, hey, like, it was the first ever transaction, and maybe the fame is better than having the money, right? Because his name is forever recorded in the history books now. So if I remember correctly, it was kind of it was to put it plainly, a pain in the ass to have this transaction, to make this transaction in the first place, because obviously there's no exchanges, and obviously there's no pizza place there's no restaurant owner that will accept Bitcoin as payment back then, right? So what ended up happening was that he went on this forum and he's like, hey, I have 10,000 Bitcoins and I'm hoping to like actually use it in some way. I like pizza. Why don't I just, offer somebody 10,000 Bitcoin if they'll like call in somewhere and order some pizza for me? So he waited for a long time, and then there was like a couple of people that seemed like they were interested, but then they ghosted him. So it was a pain in the ass for him to be able to do this, right? Until somebody finally took him up on the offer, and they phoned in to a local Papa John's in Jacksonville, Florida, where they offered where that person paid for 2 pizzas for him, and then he transferred the Bitcoin to that person. So I'm not sure if that person ended up keeping the 10,000 Bitcoin or they sold it, but I hope they ended up keeping it because it's worth, hell of a lot of money now. But anyways, that's the kind of lore on Bitcoin Pizza Day. So we just had Bitcoin Pizza Day this past, I think this was yesterday, actually. Time flies, this was yesterday was Bitcoin Pizza Day, May 22nd. And then to commemorate this holiday, there's a lot of ways that different crypto / Bitcoin companies commemorated it. And for Coinbase, they did this like pizza truck, right? So if you guys look at the second picture, is Coinbase pizza. And this actually sparked some controversy because well, first of all, like you don't see the word Bitcoin anywhere. There's no orange as well, which is the official color of Bitcoin. It's all blue. It's all in Coinbase colors, and they call it Coinbase Pizza. And then they offered $1 slices, and you can pay it. You had to pay in USDC, so like fiat, not Bitcoin. So there was actually some protesters around the Coinbase pizza truck, right? And if you guys see the next picture, there's a sign that says it's Bitcoin Pizza Day, not shitcoin Pizza Day, right? So a lot of people were upset that Coinbase did this because it's kind of like a, in their opinion, a bastardization of the holiday, right? But it was just kind of maybe trying to get you guys' thoughts on it. So first of all, before we get to the negative parts of the story, how was your Bitcoin Pizza Day? Did you have pizza? And if so, how was it? Just in general. And then maybe your thoughts on this like Coinbase pizza truck. Like, do you think that Coinbase really missed the mark, or do you think that this was okay for Coinbase to do? Because it seems like Coinbase is not, like, a lot of people are already mad at Coinbase because they have over 100 different cryptocurrencies listed, and most of them are, let's just say it, right, they're garbage, right? So it's just kind of people are upset at Coinbase already, and they did this they did this Coinbase pizza thing, and it offended the maxis even more. So do you think there's any like valid points that the maxis have, or do you think people are just overreacting? So 2-part question. Take it away, one of you.
I did in fact have some pizza on Bitcoin Pizza Day. It was pretty good. It was just a frozen pizza, nothing crazy. And with regards to the Bitcoin maxis being cringe about the Coinbase pizza truck, I think that it was pretty cringe. Like, I understand that you guys want to be happy about your holiday that is about Bitcoin, but funnily enough, Coinbase sells Bitcoin, has Bitcoin on his platform. So I don't see what your problem is. Like, honestly, it's I understand that they've got a bunch of other coins, but whether or not you are or aren't a Bitcoin maxi, it's not your job to police who does or doesn't buy a cryptocurrency, right? And what cryptocurrency those people are buying. So I don't see why you're acting like why they're acting like their holiday is being poisoned by a company that allows you to buy and sell the cryptocurrency they're referring to, and that the party is for. And so I don't really see their point. I think it's pretty cringe. And that's basically all it comes down to.
Unfortunately, I didn't celebrate Bitcoin Pizza Day. Like, I typically don't like spending money on the weekdays, so I as much as I wanted to get some pizza, I thought like maybe saving some money would be better. But let's just say
so that you can buy more Bitcoin, right?
well, I actually did buy Bitcoin like relatively frequently. By the way, use Bitcoin well if you're a Canadian. It's probably the cheapest way to buy Bitcoin. Anyway, wait, not a sponsor. Anyway, but yeah, no, let's just say I celebrated in spirit. And in regards to the Coinbase pizza, I can see why people get a little ticked off. I guess it's a bit weird how the truck is blue and they do accept like the US like currency token or coin. I mean, it kind of makes sense. Maybe if they're trying to make money, you need to be as close to the dollar as possible. I believe that's how it works. So, but I just think it's a little jokes how the entire truck is blue and like they don't even accept Bitcoin. Like maybe I don't know, like having the option of accepting Bitcoin would be pretty. I don't know if that would work out. That'd be like logistically complicated in terms of earning actual dollars, or it could work too. It depends.
Well,
you just have to like.
I would push back on that. So like it's actually fairly simple to accept Bitcoin if you use the Lightning Network, right? Which is layer 2 on Bitcoin. So it's I demonstrated it to Tristan last time I went to Calgary to go visit him. It's like, I made him install a Lightning wallet, and it's fast, it's instant, and it's free, right? So if Coinbase wanted to, and Coinbase, I believe they recently just integrated Lightning onto their actual platform as well, right? So as far as I'm aware, they didn't take Bitcoin Lightning at this truck, which is kind of strange in my opinion, right? Because like the company is not against Lightning and they've embraced it, but I guess they just didn't bother to do it. So yeah, I mean, they could have done it, and they just, I feel like, chose not to. And I think that's like also an area that offended a lot of maxis. But yeah, go on, Dom.
Yeah, no, I guess like to add to that, I think yeah, maybe they took some like L's here by making the whole entire truck blue. But on the flip side, I guess that's the Coinbase color branding. But they should have paid their proper respects and dues to like Bitcoin in itself. I felt like they didn't give it enough credit when it is like Bitcoin Pizza Day, right?
They didn't press F to pay respects. They forgot to press F.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I think they went too far off onto the Coinbase side, so I could see how some people get ticked off. But to Tristan's point, yeah, maybe they're just a little overly butthurt, which is, some people are like that. People are like, can be immature sometimes about some specific things, but I mean, that's just life. What can you do?
Anyways, actually, there's a part 2 of this story. So I wasn't done with the shit that maxis are mad at. So in case you guys are not mad enough, there's a second reason to be mad, which is Yuval Noah Harari. So if you guys don't know who he is the author of the book Sapiens. And there's also a follow-up book that he wrote called Homo Deus. And he is one of the chief advisors to the World Economic Forum. And I know that Tristan will have a lot to say about that because he's not a big fan, let's just say, of the World Economic Forum. I don't think any of us here are, but maybe we can leave that conversation for a little bit later. But yeah, anyways, Harari is one of the chief advisors to the World Economic Forum. So being part of the World Economic Forum, being one of the elders, I guess you can say, he's probably, like, you can probably deduce by that already that he's probably not a big fan of Bitcoin. But he's recently gotten into a little bit of a Twitter fight with Bitcoin people when he said in like an interview or in one of his like videos that he said that Bitcoin is a currency of distrust. So people took an issue with that statement, and he was kind of maybe forced to clarify exactly what he meant. So he took on Twitter, and this is what he posted. So this is his own words explaining on exactly what he meant, right? And so he says, when I say that Bitcoin is a currency of distrust, I'm just repeating what the Bitcoin fans say themselves. There might be good reasons not to trust the banks and governments that create dollars, yens, and other currencies, but that doesn't change the fact that the preference for Bitcoin is based on distrust of human institutions. Why is this an alarming development? Because the whole purpose of money is to create trust between strangers. Financial devices like currencies, bonds, shares, 90% of which are just data in computers, build trust between millions of strangers who can then pool their knowledge and resources together and cooperate. Humans control the world because we learn to do this. If we lose trust in human institutions, this will limit the amount of money and handicap economic activities and cooperation. I hope that humanity finds a way to build trustworthy human institutions instead of adopting technologies of distrust. It sounds like, maybe he does have a point, but at the same time, I think that I would have a lot to say against this and why I disagree personally. But before I give my reasons on why I disagree with what he just said, maybe I would, I don't want to poison you guys' thoughts. So let me just toss the question to you guys. What do you guys think of this statement? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And if you disagree, why do you disagree? Take it away.
Yeah, so I don't think he gets it, is really what it comes down to, because I don't think that because it's not necessarily about distrust in the sense of, like, I don't think distrust is the correct terminology. It's more like that Bitcoin people want ownership of their money, basically their economic output, and the way that current institutions control the creation and the distribution and every aspect of normal currencies, like the average person basically has to be at the whim of these governments, etc., and these companies, institutions, all these things, and they're unable to basically control the way that the waves flow, right? Like, it's kind of like it's more so akin to like having an anchor on like kind of a boat. If you have an anchor, you're able to stay where you want to be, right? You can kind of control your location, and you're not as controlled by the waves of the ocean, which would be kind of more like the overall markets, like the whole financial world. So it's not like about distrust per se, because it's not that I'm looking at the institutions going that they are not worthy of my trust. It's that if I don't need to trust them, I would rather live in a world where I don't need to trust the institutions to do the right thing, which oftentimes institutions have proven to not do the right thing. It's more so, how do I put myself in a scenario where I don't need to trust them to do the right thing, because they'll do the right thing because all of our interests are aligned in the first place. And Bitcoin is kind of a common currency that allows us to get on kind of the same page as to how to align our interests. And so because of that, I don't really think it's necessarily like distrust. It's just security and control of yourself and your own assets, as well as coming together with a common institution that doesn't need to be trusted. Not like singular institution, but like we don't need to be trusting of the institutions to do the right thing. If that kind of makes sense. At least that's my kind of takeaway.
Yeah, makes sense. Dom, you want to provide your thoughts on this?
You know what? I think for like maybe myself and like the audience, just in case if people are wondering, Andy, in like a TLDR, would you be able to define like Bitcoin and it's like how it's like decentralized and like the context of that? Maybe this could help like with the distrust he's talking about. I think that might help because it might help me too because I'm not fully understanding how to answer this question.
Yeah. So let me just maybe like paraphrase and summarize like Harari's points, and then I'll provide like maybe the counterpoint and why like Bitcoin isn't what he just described, right? So Harari's point is basically like, hey, we need these institutions that humanity has kind of come up with because these are like a sign of like higher civilization, right? So for example, like back then when we were cavemen, there were no banks, right? Because our societies were not sophisticated enough to have banks in the first place. And the fact that we have the banking system is like a sign of progression, and we should treasure these human institutions because they encourage, humans to like, it encourages order in society, right? Like when you like are defrauded and you can go to a bank to get your money back, that's like a big bonus, right? Where like, someone at a level down from that would be someone like, if you have a piece of gold and someone takes a gun and forces it to your head and says, give me the gold or else I'll shoot you, then that's like a lower level of order, right? So the banking institutions provide these like kind of security guarantees. And it's like, Bitcoin is kind of disrupting that system. So this is why like he doesn't like Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is kind of like people go to Bitcoin when they don't trust the banks anymore, and if enough people don't trust the banks might collapse, and then we might degrade into like a lower level of societal civilization progression. I think this is like his point in a nutshell, what he's trying to say, right? And maybe this is just me getting into my counterpoints a little bit, but just to maybe kind of explain to our audience members, and maybe this will provide some clarity for you, Dom, as well. So Bitcoin, it provides a decentralized system that negates the need for trust. So it's not that Bitcoin is a currency of distrust. Bitcoin is a trustless system. And so this is a big difference that I think we need to really keep in mind. What is the difference between distrust and trustless, right? So one is you don't trust someone, and one is you don't need to trust someone. So this is a very like subtle difference, but it's a very important difference that I don't think Harari understands, right? He's equating distrust with trustless. And the difference is that with trustless systems, you don't need to trust anyone, right? So when you send a transaction, when you send a transaction in Bitcoin, it doesn't need to go through any institutions, any of these systems that humans have built. It goes through a decentralized system that is governed by code that nobody can change. And computers are heartless, right? Computers, they don't care whether you're a king or you're the president or you're like, a billionaire, or you're just like some random guy, right? It doesn't care. So a transaction that came from a billionaire is treated the same as a transaction that came from an average Joe. So this is kind of like the beauty of Bitcoin, and where I think that Harari really misses the point is that these institutions that he's talking about, the banking institution, governments, they're all built by humans, first of all, and they're not just built by any humans. They're most often built and run by like the kind of top echelons of society who, let's just say, might not always have the best interests of everyone in mind. So Bitcoin is trying to disrupt that. And in his points, I think he was trying to argue that, you know, we should try and improve, like, you know, we do have problems in these institutions, but the solution is to improve these institutions. And my argument is that many of these institutions that he's talking about, like, you know, big government and these like big banks, a lot of it is not improvable because it's corrupt, like to the core. The entire system is corrupt to the core. So it's like, imagine if you have an apple that is rotten and you wanted to make a fruit salad out of that apple, right? And then you make a fruit salad out of the rotten apple and it tastes like garbage. Well, Harari is saying you should just invent better ways of cooking. You should just cook better, become a better chef. And it's like, no, like it doesn't matter if you got Gordon Ramsay to cook a fruit salad with a rotten apple. It's still gonna taste like garbage. It's like the problem isn't that we need to like improve these institutions. The problem is that these institutions are inherently corrupt. So a prime example of that is you know, all the money printing that we've seen since the pandemic started, right? And in fact, the pandemic was really the catalyst for an extra like kind of boost in money printing, but money printing was already happening on a mass scale even before the pandemic. So why is money printing corrupt? Well, it inflates the price of everything, right? So the poor people who rely, who are paycheck to paycheck, their net worth is mostly in cash, which is being devalued, versus the rich people, they have assets, right? They have real estate, they have maybe they have Bitcoin, right? Or they have gold, or they have stocks, or they have bonds. All these assets are going up with inflation. So the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, because the poor whose net worth is denominated in cash, well, then their net worth goes down when inflation goes up. So this is kind of like a system that's been on repeat since we left the gold standard. And this is just going to continue to get worse and worse unless we do something about it. And what should we do about it? Well, we need technologies like Bitcoin, which is trustless, not a technology of distrust, but a trustless technology to disrupt this system and to remove the need for these institutions that are corrupt. So this is my opinion. I know that was kind of a long spiel, but does that help with your questions, Dom?
That freaking helped like heck. Yeah, when like I have more of an understanding of like how all of that works, I think a trustless system would be quite neat in terms of like the future and like where it should be. I guess human emotion and like ties can like, or biasness can affect the way the economy can move, I suppose. And like classes and like people being classes could be a part of that too as well. So having a more trustless system might be more of an efficient method. But on the flip side, not to be super like one-sided Bitcoin bias, I don't know if like Bitcoin ever has like malfunctions or like issues or could possibly run into an issue. So like that could also be a con in terms of like going to a more trustless system, versus maybe a human could like fix things on the spot, although it's a corrupt human could. But anyway, there's pros and cons to everything, but I think from the sounds of things, like trustless systems like Bitcoin cryptocurrency seems good. It's a good thing. Yeah. So maybe he just has the wrong picture. I forgot to answer. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no disrespect, but I think he's totally off basis here. And he's just wrong. Tristan, do you have anything else you want to add?
I think it's also important to note the potential biases that may be affecting his opinion, because I think that a big factor for people who are into fiat is that if you have a lot of assets, fiat is good for you in the sense of if everything inflates, your asset inflates. And so the asset price will hedge against the inflation, and your total standard of living should be more or less the same, despite the increase in cost of living for basically everyone else, right? Like if you have all your money in investments and assets, or the majority, and you've got a lot of it. So you've got like, say, like $10 million and stuff, and they print a bunch of money, and all your assets go up $1 million because that's how much, additional percentage of money is now in the market. It doesn't really make a difference if everything's gone up 10% because you've gone up 10%, right? So the effect of it going up is not as bad as if it goes up and you're like the average Canadian or American or whatever, and most of your money is in cash, in which case a 10% increase in everything, like standard of living, cost of living, everything, represents a loss in 10% of your purchasing power, while the rich people will have lost very little of their purchasing power because their assets have increased with the rate of inflation. So from the perspective that I think he may be looking at is that basically I think that he tends to be on the side of like looking at it from a more of a secure position. Like I don't get the sense, and I get it, maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about on this front, but I don't get the sense that this is someone who's living paycheck to paycheck. And
obviously not, right? Like actually, I was gonna ask you about like the WEF, right? As I said, he's one of the senior advisors to the WEF, one of the village elders, if you would. So it's like, obviously he's like super rich, and he's like, people say maybe it's like a bit of a conspiracy theory, but if you go on like the Bitcoin Twitter, they're not big fans of the WEF there, let's just say. And a lot of Bitcoiners believe that the WEF is like the deep state that controls the world, right? Like it's like the small amount of elites that just kind of direct everything, and it's led by people like Harari, people like George Soros, and people like Klaus Schwab, who's the president of the WEF. And like these people are like, they have nefarious reasons, and there's a lot of like elements of conspiracy wrapped in it, but I think maybe there could be elements of a lot of truth wrapped in it as well, right? What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, no, I think that the WEF is clearly very suspicious, because the things that they say are not aligned with the things that the average person wants, right? And I think that is a big factor. The fact that the WEF is such a powerful entity with so many important people who are members of it, and yet it's so woefully misaligned with the average person, and in fact oftentimes is against the average person in basically finding ways to reduce their standard of living without, like kind of like how you boil a frog, it doesn't jump out if you increase the heat slowly. And I feel like that tends to be kind of more so what their line of thinking is. And I think that is also kind of why Bitcoin represents a big threat to them, because if you control these institutions, the institutions that he's referring to, that he's saying needs to be trustworthy human institutions, they're going to be trustworthy for you when you are one of the leading controllers of them, and they're going to be, you're going to be able to trust them because, I'm going to do the good things for me, right? So, and I think that when you're in a position of a larger amount of power, or just honestly just being in a position where you interact at a very high level with these institutions in general, I think that will cause you to be more pro these institutions, because they're more likely to be pro you, is kind of what I'm thinking, right? And so I think that this is it's definitely not he's I would say is his take wrong? Like, I think that I disagree with his take on Bitcoin. And at the same time, I think that I understand why he's taking the take that he's taking. That's a lot of takes in one sentence. But I understand where he's coming from when you take into account that basically Bitcoin is representing a direct competition for the institutions that and the bureaucracy and the whole system that they have a significant amount of influence over. Right.
Yeah, it's like the king says the king is good. Well, obviously that's what you're going to say if you're the king, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's move on to the next story if you guys don't have anything else to add for this one. All right, so the next story is yet another crisis in Canada. So as you guys are well aware, we've been talking about various issues that this country of that we all live in, Canada, is facing. And we talk about the housing issue a lot because that's kind of maybe top of mind right now. But there's also maybe a stealth issue that's kind of creeping up that people are, I guess, aware of, but it's not nearly talked about as much as the housing issue, which is the healthcare issue. So I would say that we have a healthcare issue in Canada. And, you know, many people from America or other places in the world, they might not know about this, and they might not they might not be aware of the gravity of the situation, and they might be like, hey, like, what do you have to complain about healthcare in Canada? Because you guys have universal healthcare, and if you're coming from America, obviously you don't, right? It's like, you know, what do you guys have to complain about? But I'm going to present some maybe disturbing statistics that may indicate that not all is well in paradise. Which is that over 6 million Canadians are without a family doctor, and that represents about 22% of our population are without a family doctor. And this is in contrast to only about 8% of Americans who don't have health insurance. So, you know, we complain a lot about, like, people in Canada kind of take it as a point of pride that, you know, we have universal healthcare, and, you know, America, you guys have to pay for healthcare insurance, and if you don't have insurance, you get slapped with like a $50,000 bill for a knee injury, and then you're done you're financially screwed for the rest of your life. Well, that is true. That is, like, it only affects 8% of Americans who don't have the healthcare insurance, right? I'm not saying that, you know, because obviously America is a big populous country, and 8% is a lot of people. But what I'm saying is that, like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do anything about that, like, you know, as a society, as a civilization. But it's like, you know, if you just look at it from a proportional standpoint, 22% of Canadians don't have a family doctor. I think that's, like, also a huge issue. And I'm just wondering, like, what you guys have in mind about this story. Like, do you guys feel that our healthcare system in Canada is adequate? And if not, like, how do we address this current issue? Do you think that this is a big issue, or is it being overplayed? It's just like, if it is a big issue, how would you kind of approach to fixing it if you were the government, or if you were prime minister or something like that? So I'm just curious to get your opinions on that, on this issue.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I'll just get this started here. I could definitely see it as being an issue for sure. I may have heard around that people are looking for family doctors, but obviously they're kind of struggling with that. And then, so in my head, there's like a few conclusions that I'm coming up with. First and foremost, I think it's just our immigration. I think there's so many people that are coming into Canada, and just because there's so many people in Canada or coming into Canada, they're obviously going to need family doctors. And with the surplus amount of people, there's only so many family doctors in existence. And so with all that people, you obviously can't help everyone. So what can you do? That's why maybe perhaps people are having a lot of issues with finding family doctors. And then my second thing too as well is, this is more of a theory. I don't know if this would be the case, but I guess a lot of people from the pandemic, or doctors specifically and nurses, are really burnt out, and maybe they possibly try to find a new profession outside of the medical field maybe it's not really their thing. And then on the caveat or other side too, becoming a doctor is like really expensive. There's a lot of medical debt with it. So maybe a lot of other people don't want to do it just because they could just be, an AI engineer or like a software engineer and do like much less school and make more money or something. And I think the last points, this is all just like speculation. I don't know if any of this is true. It could be, I'm not sure. But I think there's a lot of like immigrants coming in, but I think their papers aren't credible for like working in our medical field. So if there was more leniency, maybe as theoretical prime minister, I would like, double assess that. So like staffing in Canada in terms of our hospitals and medical fields can be a little more, like down. I mean, sorry, up and rather than down, I guess. So I think that's what I would do.
Yeah, Tristan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Don is kind of on the right track with that, with the regards to, acknowledging credentials of immigrants, because, if we're going to be bringing in a ton of people who are highly skilled, highly, our system encourages, like our immigration system encourages getting people like doctors, and which means that there probably are a lot of doctors who came to Canada who are not able to practice medicine. So there's definitely a lot of people who could be working as a doctor who are not currently working as a doctor. So if there was some efforts to acknowledge that those credentials at a quicker rate and verify that these people are adept enough to handle the task, that would be, I think, very beneficial. But yeah, I can definitely say that this is an ongoing problem. We've been struggling to swap our family doctor after our move. And I know for a fact that some of our friends who moved to Alberta were also struggling to find a family doctor. So it's definitely pretty difficult to get one right now. There's just not enough doctors for the number of people, especially when a lot of people move to one area. So Calgary itself has gained some, like, I think it's like 100,000 people or so in the last couple of years or more. And so that number of people is going to cause a lot of problems with having enough doctors. So that's a pretty big influx. But yeah, it's a problem. I'll say that it's still not nearly as bad as the 8% of Americans not having health insurance, because that's 24 million people or so in the States who don't have access to health insurance. That's a lot more. And to be clear, 6 million Canadians not having a family doctor. Yeah, not having a family doctor is a problem, but it's not as big a problem as not having health insurance. Because if I fall down the stairs and, hit my head, I can still go to the Merge and be seen without paying a penny. Whereas if you don't have health insurance and you fall down the stairs in the States, well, do you go to the Emerge and pay horrendous amounts of money, or do you just hope that you didn't get something that's going to kill you? So I think that at the very least we don't have that kind of issue with like emergency kind of things, but it's definitely a problem for resolving stuff early, right? So for example, like making sure if you get a regular checkup to ensure you don't have like cancer or something, right? It's definitely better to catch all of that kind of stuff early, and if you don't have a family doctor, it's a lot harder to catch that early. So
yeah, it is a valid point that you brought up, and maybe my counter to that is that, like, yeah, obviously 8% of Americans who don't have healthcare insurance, that's a huge problem. But besides the family doctor problem, that's not like the full extent even of our problems here in Canada with healthcare. It's also the wait times, right? So the wait times are, like, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but it's like, I know it's significantly longer in Canada to like have to wait to get seen by a doctor, whether it's like a specialist or if like you had to go to the ER even. Like there's stories about how people have died waiting in the ER because they had a medical emergency, but it's just they had to wait for hours and hours, and they weren't being able, like a doctor wasn't able to see them in time, and then they died in the ER because the wait times are just so long, right? So there's like issues like that as well. And maybe just to like spice things up a bit, I know we're like we're known as like an anti-Trudeau show, so I'm just gonna like go ahead and ask this question: how much do you think this issue is Trudeau's fault? Right. So I want to be fair, right? So you guys know I'm not a big fan of Trudeau, but it's like I try to be fair, no matter if it's towards Trudeau or towards anyone else, right? So let me toss the question to you guys first before I impart my opinion: is how much of this issue do you think Trudeau should take responsibility for, if at all?
I think there's like two specific reasons as to how it could be his fault. Like as I previously mentioned before, I think immigration's a little out of hand. So with so many people, of course, you're gonna have issues with finding family doctors. Like by theory, there might be like the same amount of family doctors, if not a little less, because of the pandemic, and just because of more people coming in, people are just gonna get unlucky and not find family doctors. And I think in an economic standpoint, maybe certain like policies could have been handled differently. Like the budget, in fact, did not balance itself. So because of the budget not balancing itself, it can butterfly effect into a lot of different situations.
Shots fired.
No, I want to stay as neutral as possible. Man, I want to be anyway. Yeah, maybe because the budget did not, in fact, balance itself. Dang, it's not helping me. Anyway, that could be a part of the issue as to why things are the way they are now. So, anyways, yeah, I think that's what I think so far.
Yeah, Tristan, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that blaming Trudeau for this problem is not really it's not really his fault per se. You can make the argument that there's high immigration results in less people, like less doctors per person. But I also feel like high immigration, with the way our system works, could be a benefit for family doctors, in the sense of our immigration system does tend to be like doctor good, but for some reason it also goes, but doctor can't work as doctor. In which case it's like, why did we bother taking this doctor from a different country so that they can not be a doctor in Canada? And I feel like that's the big problem that I think on that front. So it's difficult for me to say how much of the actual healthcare issue is Trudeau's fault and not just the system's fault. And I don't think that Trudeau has direct control of the credential evaluation of the new potential doctors that are immigrating into Canada. Like the federal government does control the immigration rate. So you could make the argument that if they're not going to accept credentials very easily, maybe we should just not let in as many people so that our healthcare system can, grow at a slower rate to keep up. But again, I don't think that this problem is in itself a particularly Trudeau specific issue. I think we would be having this problem with basically any other leader. And a big part of that is also just the fact that we are right beside America, which has much higher paid doctors than in Canada. So there is always going to be an inherent incentive for a Canadian doctor to leave Canada and go to the States, because you can make literally like 5 or 6 times more money pretty comfortably just by jumping the border, right? Like anywhere from 2 to 5.
On that note, Tristan, can you speak to what you would do if you were the prime minister? Like, what are some solutions that sound interesting to you that, maybe we should explore, right? Because I know you just said that, like, the prime minister doesn't have, direct control over this because, a lot of healthcare in Canada's on a provincial basis, right? But I think we've established that there are things that we can do on like a federal level as well, right? So if you were the top man in charge, what are some potential ideas that we should throw around? We don't have to like, you don't have to 100% guarantee that like this will work, but like, just toss out some ideas,
Yeah, so a few areas that you could do investments into. So one would be into investing into scholarships, et cetera, for students that go into medical studies in Canada, with a caveat on them that they have to stay within Canada for X number of years. Basically, you give them some sort of funding for their schooling so that they can now do their schooling without coming out with as much debt. But in exchange, they have to stay in Canada and work in the Canadian healthcare system for like a set amount of time, kind of similar to like how the military college has like, you get your schooling paid for, but in exchange, you now have to serve in the military for X number of years, right? So something to that effect, I feel like would be an area where we could invest it. And then in addition, like, as I said, kind of allowing some of these doctors from other countries to work, or if they aren't up to snuff, putting them through a program, investing in programs to get them up to speed with Canadian standards as quickly as possible. And then the other option, would be giving incentives for doctors to move to places that are in where there's higher demand, rather than keeping doctors in places with lower demand. So giving them like a moving benefit. And then the other option is to invest more money into the healthcare system itself so that the doctors here are higher paid and there's less of an incentive for them to leave the country and go to America. Because if you're looking at the difference between being compensated like 5 times as much, but say you're a doctor and you're uncomfortable with guns or something like that, if now you're getting paid like enough money that it's like only like a couple times more, maybe you'll be like, I'd rather feel safer. My peace of mind is worth this additional income that I could get from moving to the States, right? Or something to that effect. These are just kind of some things that I'm thinking about, but I'm not 100% certain if those would fix it, but those are just kind of the general thought process I'm following.
No, I think those are good ideas. And, I'm known as, I guess, the extremist on this show. It's like I take you guys' ideas and I like put it to the extreme, and that's like my idea. But I'm gonna say maybe 2 things that are like, number 1 is gonna be controversial, and maybe number 2 not so much. But the controversial thing that I wanted to say, the solution to this problem, and I know that I'm probably going to get some pushback from the comments and maybe even from you guys. But I think it's a huge taboo in Canada to talk about having a private option for healthcare. But I think that this is a conversation that we necessarily need to have. Now, I'm not saying that we need to absolutely do a private option and that's the only solution to taking care of the healthcare issue. But I think that this is, again, a conversation that we should be having, right? So this is the theory on why it could work. So I'm not suggesting that we take away anybody's universal healthcare. It's like we have a public system and that public system should stay. However, if somebody can afford to have a private option and to, pay for healthcare to get seen faster and to, just be more assured that if they have an emergency that they can get seen faster, then I think that that'll provide an incentive to create like a separate system where it'll suck in money, right? And that'll increase the size of the pie for everyone, because there's now all of a sudden way more incentive to be a doctor, because you raise the average kind of pay that a doctor would take in, right? So it would create this like, it would create an extra boost to the industry and to the economy that is the healthcare service, right? So I think the issue right now is that we're focused on, like, again, we're focused on fighting over the scraps, right? Because we only have so many doctors, and there's clearly not enough doctors to go around, and we're fighting over, like, how do we allocate the current doctors we have to as many patients as we can? How do we overwork these guys as much as possible? And that's just not the solution, because like these are human beings. They have limits, right? Like you can only have so many patients at the same time. If you're a family doctor and you're taking care of like 20 patients, like your ability to take on the 21st patient is just going to decrease, no matter if you're like, no, even if you're like, you get like 4 hours of sleep per night, like you're still gonna like struggle, right? Eventually. So I think what we need to focus on is to increase the amount of total doctors in the first place. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by increasing the size of the pie for everyone. And I think having a private option would definitely help out with that. So that's like controversial opinion number one. I know that Tristan, you probably disagreed with everything I just said. I don't know about what you think of that, Dom, but I'll give you a chance to respond later. But point number two, maybe less controversial, is I think that we should do the opposite of what the Liberals suggested in the budget. So if you guys recall, what the budget said was that they're going to increase the capital gains tax they're going to increase the capital gains inclusion rate to 66%. So just in case you guys, like for audience members who don't know what that means, is that in Canada, capital gains is like a percentage of your capital gains that's added to your taxable income. So before it was 50% for everyone. Now it's going to be 66% for capital gains over $250,000. So the issue with this change is that a lot of doctors, they operate as small businesses, and they have capital gains. So these capital gains from these doctors who run family offices, they would not be exempt under the current rules of what the Liberals are proposing, and they would be charged the extra tax once that comes into effect. So I think this is a huge issue, because this further disincentivizes people to become doctors, right? Because it's like, I'm going to go to medical school for 10 years and then I'm going to still get hit with the extra tax because I'm all of a sudden considered rich. It's like, yes, doctors make a lot, but then they also have a ton of debt from medical school. And then, their work is also very difficult, right? So I think we could make an argument that doctors should actually be paid more than what they are already making, even though it's already like, above average what they're making. So what I think is that we should do the opposite. Instead of increasing taxes on doctors, we should make an exemption. And we should not only make an exemption, we should make an exemption such that they pay 0% capital gains tax. So if you're a doctor, then you don't pay capital gains tax at all, right? Like, isn't that such? Everyone else has to pay, like, has to do the 50% capital gains rate inclusion, or if you make over 250K, it's 66%. But if you're a doctor, it's just zero, like forever, always, right? Like, isn't that such a huge incentive that we should be thinking about, right? And I don't know. I think that's just another idea that I tossed out, and basically, like, it kind of ties into what I said earlier. Is like, how much of this is Trudeau's fault? Well, maybe the doctor shortage is not directly his fault, but a lot of the policies that he's pushed, especially recently, I think has made this issue worse. So I think he's indirectly responsible for this issue. But that's just my opinion. I know a lot of controversial stuff that I just said. Let me toss it to anyone who wants to speak.
I'm firmly against privatizing healthcare. and there's a multitude of different reasons for that. I'll just throw out a few of them because I don't want to spend too much time on this topic because we've been here a while. But the big issue I see with privatizing healthcare, well, there's a few, but one of the big issues is the corruption of the incentives for privatized versus public healthcare, because by definition, if the healthcare is trying to, I guess maybe I might need to clarify a little bit on this. When you say privatizing, Andy, are you meaning like company, or like what's the funding structure? Like, who's funding it?
So you would allow doctors to open their family offices and charge a subscription fee, or maybe even a one-time fee if you need to do walk-in appointments and stuff like that, when patients need to get healthcare, right? And a prescription fee model might work better because it's like it doesn't, their cost doesn't spike from month to month, and it's like an expected kind of fee. It's almost like healthcare insurance, but it'll be ideally a lot cheaper than what the Americans are paying for healthcare insurance, and it'll just go a little bit of an extra way to, just give more incentive, give more financial incentives to like these like small family offices that the doctors are running. So it's prescription fee model, or I guess doctors will be allowed to charge one-time fees as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just to start on that one, why would you ever not do that as a doctor? Why, like, what incentive do I have to be a public healthcare doctor rather than do that? Because obviously the financial gains from doing it that way would be way higher than the financial gains for working in the public sector, which to me kind of suggested, instead of making the pie bigger, you're actually just cannibalizing the public sector for your private sector that you've now created, in which case, instead of there being a bigger pie, there's now a pie that costs a lot of money to the end user, and a pie that can no longer sustain the rest of the users, right? So that's kind of one of the big issues that I see with the kind of thought process with the privatized. And I just don't see there being a sufficient increase in people becoming a doctor regardless, because even if we do that section with the privatized, there's still going to be a lot more money to be made in the States than going that route, I would expect. So you're going to be losing your public doctors to that sector and America, in which case I feel like we're going to end up with even more of a shortage for the public side, which means that the public side gets worse, which means that the private side gets more people going to it, because they literally, there's no one at the public, like there's no one working at the public side, in which case now everyone is just paying more, because instead of paying for the instead of going to the public healthcare, which is, we've already provided the funding through our taxes for. And let's be clear, the taxes aren't going to come down even if the public healthcare becomes cheaper, right? Even if the cost of it is lower, the taxes aren't going to come down. I don't. It's like Loblaws. It's like people thinking Loblaws is going to lower their costs, like at the grocery store, because if we take off the carbon tax, like it's not going to happen. So I just don't really see how we come out better in this scenario, in that one.
So my counter to that is that like you can look at the lawyer system, right? So we have what's called public defenders, right? So this is the case in America and in Canada too, I believe, where if you can't afford a lawyer, then the Crown will assign you one. So we do have a public defender kind of industry where we have public lawyers for people who can't afford their private lawyers, but then we also have private lawyers, right? So imagine, I'm just thinking, if we did the lawyer system the same way that we do the healthcare system, where we forbid people to hire private lawyers, and we say that everyone has to have a public lawyer, a public defendant, then I think that it'll reduce the efficiency of our law system as well, right? Because it's like, it's already backed up, and then you can't hire like, you know, a lawyer, and then you might not get a public defender, and you have to wait to get a public defender. And it's just, I think that we can look at the lawyer system for you know, a potential solution to apply to our healthcare.
But do you not see how that would result in the rich it's basically another case of how the rich are now better off than everyone else? Because if I'm rich, I can afford the better doctor, and so I can just pay the money to get better service, just like in the lawyer system, where if I'm rich and you've got a public defender, I can afford to just pay for the best private guy there is, and the private guy will be better because the private guy is more highly compensated. So there's more incentive for you to be private. And I think in that regard, I don't really think that it's a good strategy to take our best doctors and give them an incentive to go and, you know, reap the most financial reward by going to the private sector, in which case now we have to compensate them directly for that service. Like, I think that it's like, I think they should be higher paid if they're the best doctors, but I don't think that it should be explicitly me going, I've got $5 million over this guy who's about to die, and I'm willing to drop that right now for my, I don't know, I'm going to jump the queue and I'm going to drop $500,000 to do it. And this other guy who needed the organ transplant 6 months ago, who's been in the queue, I'm just going to jump over him because I've got money. And I don't think that's right either, right?
Yeah, I definitely see what you're talking about. And, you know, my response is, unfortunately, like, life isn't fair, right? We all know that, like, beautiful people get hired more easily at a job interview, right? And like, rich people, they can afford more healthy food and they live longer. And there's a lot of these like kind of injustices. But from where I'm coming from, my point is just that it's kind of like almost like communism versus capitalism, right? It's like, in capitalism, we have a bunch of rich people and then we have a bunch of poor people, and you can say that, hey, this looks really unfair. But in communism, it's just, we commandeer the wealth of the rich and we distribute it to everyone, and then everyone's poured together, right? So I think that it comes down to a question of, is our current system, which is a public system, you're not allowed to have a private option, is that system working? And if it's not working, then that means that we're all getting bad healthcare together, right? So what I'm advocating for is, maybe we could have some people get good healthcare and some people have the current healthcare, and then once we get the good healthcare to a certain portion of the population, then we can worry about improving the bad healthcare part. But if we continue down our current path, it's just everyone gets bad healthcare, right? And before you make a counter to that, let me just tell you an anecdotal story where one of the like former pastors of my parents' church, whom back then I attended many of his sermons, let's just say, he got colon cancer, and he just passed away a few weeks ago. So if I remember correctly, the full story is that, you know, between the time that he was diagnosed and between the time he passed away, and he was kind of young, by the way, he was only 65 when he passed away a few weeks ago. So between the time that he was diagnosed and between the time that you know, he died, there was a period of time where the doctors were saying that, you know, like, it wasn't like immediately diagnosed as terminal, right? Like, there was a period of time where there was hope that something could have been done, and he needed, you know, like chemo and surgery and all this stuff. And there was like this like one surgery that he really needed, and he was put on a wait list for here in Canada. And the wait list times was just dragging on for too long. So eventually he decided to go to the States for the surgery. And when he went to the States, he was pretty much able to get the surgery pretty much right away. And unfortunately, in this case, it didn't really help him. But, I can't help but wonder if, like, how many cases are like this where the being on the wait list here in Canada costs somebody their life, right? And the fact that, like, he was willing to pay, right? He had money. I think he ran a restaurant business before he became a pastor. And he was willing to pay to get this surgery if a surgery can be had, but like the Canadian system literally would not allow it. And then he was forced to travel to the States. Not to sound heartless, but you got to think of it from the economic standpoint where, like, all that money that could have gone into the Canadian healthcare system, like, went into America, right? And I understand this is talking about human lives here, but, it's economics and human lives are often intertwined, right? So, this is just maybe you can argue, yeah, that's an anecdotal example, but this is a real life thing that happened. I can't help but think that if the wait times for like surgeries and stuff here in Canada was shorter, how many lives would that save, right? So, you're saying that it's unfair that, rich people get to pay to skip the line and stuff. And I understand that. But I think it's also an injustice how long that we have to wait for important surgeries here in Canada, how many people die on the waiting list before ever getting the surgery, right? And if traveling to the States to get private healthcare, if let's say it wasn't an option, then this would cost somebody their life. So yeah, I don't know. Dom, did you want to say something, or do you want to pass it to Tristan?
No, Tristan, go first. Go ahead. It's kind of like it's a crazy situation. Okay, go ahead.
I just want to, like, I'm sorry to hear about your pastor passing away, but I'll just say that I think it's clear to all of us here that there is a problem with the Canadian healthcare system. There's not enough doctors. There's not enough health going around. The wait times are too long. There is clearly an issue. So I don't want to like, the fact that the wait time was so long that he had to go to America to try and speed up that wait time is a problem. That's clearly a problem. So I don't want to make it sound like I am ever once suggesting that Canada has its healthcare system figured out. That being said, in the past, we have had a healthcare system in which wait times were relatively low. You waited a bit, but you didn't wait that long. And you would get helped relatively quickly. And I would say that the majority of people were having a reasonable experience in the healthcare system. I would say that it has gotten a lot worse. So I think that the thing that we fundamentally disagree on is the solutions on how to fix that, because I think that the disagreement is the fact that I think that you view the privatized as a potential way to get out of this, whereas I kind of see the private system as a potential problem that introducing it would make it worse, right? And then with regards to the paying, like, you make it worse in general, and then you have to pay more money. So I'm highly suspicious of privatized healthcare in general, and particularly because of the fact that the States, I would say, as a whole, has a worse, maybe not like explicitly worse, because I don't think that their healthcare system is as overwhelmed as ours is, but I would say that as a cost to healthcare received, it's not a very good calculus, and so I don't think that the privatized solution is is one that actually results in a better scenario for us in the end. I think that once you allow the privatization, it's really hard to claw that back into a public healthcare system again. Once you've resolved an overwhelmed healthcare scenario. So that's kind of where I think I'm pretty much going to leave it at.
Yeah, I mean, again, I won't go as far as to say that like the private option is the way to go, right? But all I'm saying is, like, it is taboo in Canada to talk about it, but my opinion is that it shouldn't be, and we should have a genuine debate, because if everything in the public system was good, then we wouldn't be talking about this and everything would be fine, right? And this wouldn't even be on the radar. But I think it's gotten bad to the point where we need to explore other options, right? And like, I understand what you're saying about it being kind of a Pandora's box where if you open it, you can't close it again. And I totally get that. But I think that's like, is it time to break the glass and pull the emergency lever, even though it's not the most beautiful option that is available to us? That's kind of my question, right? I think that it is time, and that's my opinion, and I think that we should have a conversation about it. But yeah, Dom, some final thoughts. You haven't spoken in a while, so I wanted to give you a chance to speak before we round off this topic.
Yeah, no worries. So I think like from hearing both of you guys, like I may possibly be more biased towards like Tristan. I'll explain why. It's like you go to Canada's Wonderland or like Disneyland or Universal Studios. There's like the general line, and then there's like the skip the line, right? This is exactly it. I swear to God. So yeah, it'd be nice because like if you have the money, sure, go ahead, skip the line, like buy the skip the line ticket. It makes sense. But at the same time, for the people who can't really afford the skip the line ticket and who just choose to wait, I think with a lot of people choosing to go to the skip the line ticket and then continuing to do that, I think the person who's extremely poor has like a worse chance in the long run to get helped. So like the skip the line like ticket could be a good method at first, but like if it gets a little out of hand, then I think poor old like Detroit, Michigan person, it's kind of bad. I'm like profiling, but like they might get like the least amount of help possible in like the long run. Like that could be the theory. So I mean, while I get where Andy's coming from, I also get where Tristan's from. So like it might be better to skip the line setting altogether and just keep like the behemoth general line. You know what I mean? Like
No, but that's like a point that I was trying to make, right? So if skip the line if pay to skip the line wasn't an option, then we all wait in the hot sun for like an hour. But if we had the skip the line option, then we at least the people who can afford it, at least they will get like the skip the line option, right? At least they will get on the ride faster. And like, yeah, sure, it sucks if you can't afford to skip the line and then like you're watching the people like get to skip the line in front of you and you're in the line still waiting in the hot sun. I understand that, right? It's like in a society, I think there will always be financial unequalness, right? Some people will be rich, some people will be poor, but it's just I'd rather have that than have everybody poor together, and that's kind of my point. But yeah. Anyways, Tristan, final thoughts. We got to wrap this up, or else.
Yeah, I think it's better to just have more carts going around on the behemoths so that the line moves faster. Yeah, no. So just saying.
No, I totally get that's the fundamental issue, right? It's just I think we maybe disagree a little on like how we exactly get there. As I've always advocated, the first solution, the best solution is just to increase the size of the pie for everyone, right? If you have a bunch of people waiting in the line at an amusement park, maybe the best solution is just to build more rides, right? Then the lines reduce for everybody, and even if you don't pay for the fast lane, then the line will be shorter. But it's just how do we get there, right? In the amusement park solution, it's like how do we generate more income for the amusement park so that they would be willing to invest more in building more rides, right? So it's kind of like that idea, and maybe having a fast lane will give them more money, and then they would be more willing to build more rides. So it's kind of that like the capitalist solution. And I know that like might be triggering for some people, but that's just my opinion. All right, so it's time to move on to our last story of tonight, which is a favorite of both Dom and Tristan. So let me explain. So the stock that Dom was teasing all along was NVIDIA, which is not that big of a shock because it's literally the most talked about stock right now on the stock market. And NVIDIA just reported their earnings. And shocker, they beat expectations again by quite a big amount. So their Q1 revenues came in at $26 billion, where the estimate was $24.7 billion. And their adjusted EPS came in at $6.12, as opposed to the estimate, which was $5.65. So quite nice beats there. And then they also kind of gave more details about their upcoming chip called Blackwell. So if I understand correctly, the Blackwell chip, it's like significantly better than what they have currently. It's not just, Apple where they make a chip 30% faster. It's like in some metrics, they're like literally 30x faster than what they have on the market right now. So it's a really big step change compared to the chips that they have currently. So all this was good news, and the market really liked it, and the stock went up today. In fact, it was like the only thing that went up. Everything else went down. So the theory was that people sold literally everything to buy NVIDIA, because like NVIDIA going up like, what was it, like 8 or 10% or something like that? That's like over $200 billion of market cap added in just one day. So it's like, I don't know, 20% of the GDP of Canada that's just added in one day. So that amount of money just like it can't come from nowhere unless you're the Fed, and the stock market does not have the Jerome Powell's ability to print money. So when you want to buy NVIDIA, you have to sell something else. So I think that's mostly what happened. A lot of stocks were red today, except for NVIDIA. And yeah, basically, Dom, why don't I pass it to you first? Because you said you're interested. Oh, and the biggest thing I almost forgot. They announced a 10-to-1 stock split that's effective June 10th, I believe. So yeah, basically, Dom, let me pass it to you. What do you think about the stock split? What do you think about the earnings? And why are you interested in buying NVIDIA? I think you said earlier you were interested in buying it, right? So just kind of give your brief bullish thesis, I guess.
Okay, so let's see if I remember all those questions. But I think as of right now, I'm quite interested in NVIDIA just because of obviously it's like successes are right now. I was having the conversation with you guys on our Facebook Messenger chat, and it still seems like they are the leading AI chip designer for like all things AI or whatever you may call it. So I think as of right now, that's pretty promising. In theory, there could be like a bubble happening right now, and if I per se go in, I could be on like the short end of the stick, and then maybe this bubble will pop and like another competitor will come and like make a competitive AI chip or whatever you may call it, and then I could be screwed. But I think as of right now, like post split, I think I'm gonna buy a bit. I'm not gonna buy a substantial amount, or maybe before, who knows? And we'll see and go from there. But as of right now, the success of the company is quite crazy, and I just want to ride on the train too. But no, I totally understand the whole premise of the company. So like graphics cards, chips, yeah, it is what it is. So I think I can probably hop on. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. So why don't I pass it off to Tristan? Tristan, are you interested in buying this stock? And why or why not? And actually, after that, there's also a segment that I wanted you to lead, because you mentioned something about a technology called RISC-V that apparently it's very promising. And I'll be honest, I have not heard of this thing like RISC-V and what it is until you told me about it yesterday. So yeah, I think this segment is going to be called the Tristan Tech Talk. So you're going to be the host temporarily as you take us through this RISC-V thing and explain to our audience and myself. And I'm sure, Dom, I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but explain to everyone exactly what it is. But yeah, so NVIDIA first, and then talk about RISC-V.
All right, NVIDIA first. Yeah, I think that NVIDIA has a pretty winning. They've got a winning position in the sense that they have the best chips for AI currently. They have a pretty compelling bull thesis in the sense of like, or at least they have had a pretty compelling bull thesis for the last like few couple years with AI growing so rapidly and them being basically the only ones who can provide the AI capable chips, or at least the best ones. So they functionally had a money printer in the sense of like, however many chips they can make, people will buy them no matter what, no matter what price they charge, more or less. Which means that they've had a pretty winning run for a while, which is a little bit frustrating because obviously, but I sold my NVIDIA prior to this run, which was, obviously a mistake. But I guess I'd missed quite the level of necessity that the AI chips represented and the GPU, the GPU aspect, and the fact that NVIDIA was just essentially the only real option for it at the time. So because of that fact, I wasn't in it for the run. And at this point, I don't think that I'm particularly interested in joining at these prices, because I think at this point, the company is fairly, it's either fairly valued or overvalued. There's nothing to me to suggest that it's undervalued at this point. So because I don't view it as undervalued, my investing strategy tends to be to find stuff that I would consider undervalued and purchase that with the hopes of a higher return. NVIDIA, I don't think represents a undervalued opportunity. It's more of a fairly valued and potentially overvalued, depending on how much of this AI stuff actually turns into something revenue generating for NVIDIA, and how much money they actually are making for it, and how sustainable it is. Because it doesn't really matter too much if they make a ton of money in this year and next year, if suddenly they make no more money from it, and suddenly their revenues tank significantly because there's an alternatives that appear that could take its crown. Not that I'm necessarily saying that that'll happen, but it's just I don't think that NVIDIA is going to, have a crazy explosion in terms of value from what it is now. Whereas, previously, back when I had originally purchased it, it has exponentially grown from there. So I would say the bull thesis for me is like a little bit, it's kind of similar more to like buying an Apple, where it's like you buy Apple because you expect Apple to grow a bit. They've got good stuff. You're basically hedging inflation at the same time, because Apple's got good stuff. People are buying Apple stuff. People want to buy Apple stuff. Apple's just going to keep going, right? They're well managed. They've got a good strategy. They've got lots of cash. NVIDIA is basically turning into another sort of Apple-like entity, where it has good money, good income. You're not really expecting it to do it, you're not expecting it to double from here anytime soon, right? Whereas like a smaller company like PayPal, for instance, if PayPal were to double, it would be not nearly as insane of a growth projection as like NVIDIA at this point. So that's kind of my thought process with them. They don't really fit into my investing strategy currently, so I won't be investing into them at this point. I am sad that I missed the big rally though. So you win some, you lose some.
I mean, well, so I used to own NVIDIA stock when it was around like $200 as well, and I sold it like way too early. Sold it like not even when it hit like 300. So, but yeah, back then like Tristan, my bullish thesis on NVIDIA was surrounding the gaming part of NVIDIA, because I thought that like, hey, like people are gonna play games more because like of COVID and like work from home, and like people are like at home more and stuff like that. And like gaming was gonna be the next big thing for NVIDIA, and their GPUs are like world leading for gaming. That was like my angle of approach, and that was like, you know, it's definitely a part of their business, but it's clearly I missed the mark. I missed the big picture, right? Like, what's that saying? Like, I missed the trees for the forest, or I missed the forest for the trees. That whatever that saying is kind of like I ignored the AI side, which I shouldn't have. But yeah, in terms of like my bullish thesis, just very quickly before I pass it back to Tristan to talk about the Tristan tech talk. My opinions on NVIDIA is that, yeah, it's unfortunate that I missed the boat. But yeah, I would not be buying NVIDIA at current prices, just because I think the opportunity cost of NVIDIA is massive if you're buying here. So my thesis around Bitcoin miners, for instance, so I just added Iron to my portfolio the other day, and I've been accumulating even more shares since I talked about it first last week on last week's show. So my bullish thesis on Iron, which if I am right, by the end of this cycle, which is predicted to end somewhere like, you know, mid to late 2025, by the end of this Bitcoin bull run cycle, Iron would do at least a 10x from where it is now. And that's my base case. And that's if Iron just like, you know, has no more positive surprises, if they just execute on stuff that they're promising right now. It's my base case is that they're going to 10x from their current price. So that would be, I don't know, $70 per share, something like that, right? But what would it take for NVIDIA to 10x? Well, NVIDIA is at like what, $2.5 trillion, something like that. So you're talking about like a 26 trillion dollar company. If they were to 10x, there's literally not enough money in the world for that to happen. So if you look at, I think NVIDIA's market cap has already exceeded Russia's GDP, right? Like if it hits $25 trillion, then that would mean that, I don't know, there's $100 trillion worth of I think like real estate in the world or something like that. No, way more. Okay, 100 trillion. That was for stocks. Sorry, I think there's like $100 trillion worth of stocks in the world. So if NVIDIA hits 25 trillion, then that would be a quarter of all stocks. So like 25% of all the stocks in the world would just be one company if NVIDIA were to 10x. So this is what I mean when I say that there's literally not enough money in the world for NVIDIA to 10x, at least in the short term, right? Maybe like in another 10 years, it could do it. But even then, right? Like even in 10 years, I don't think NVIDIA can do another 10x. I mean, I could be wrong, right? Like I've been wrong plenty of times. Maybe this AI thing will really like take over, right? Like you need super advanced AGI to completely take over everything. And then we'd be like the, you know, the fat people in Wall-E, where we're just all in like these little pods. Like it would take something like that to happen, I would assume. And then by that point, like the world would be so different. It's not even worth talking about anything, what that world would be like, because it'll just like everything we're talking about right now will be irrelevant. But yeah, I think that like, it's just my point is that the opportunity cost of NVIDIA, it's just too massive for me. And I like can think of many ways to deploy my cash elsewhere that could earn a lot more money, at least in the short to medium term. So yeah, anyways, let me pass it back to you then, Tristan, if you want to talk about your Tristan Tech Talk.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here quickly with NVIDIA first. The reason I sold was because of how bad the 4000 series RTX cards were. I thought they were really and clearly it didn't matter. Anyway, yes, RISC. So RISC, it's RISC-V is actually what it is, not RISC-V. The V is Roman numerals. And what it is it is like an open source open source instruction set architecture, and that means basically, so it's designed on the RISC prototype, which is so RISC stands for let me get the reduced instruction set computer. And RISC computers are, in contrast to the x86 style Windows, all of those are complex instruction set computers. And so that basically means that there is a lot of instructions that were being done by the complex ones, which basically reduced the amount of work that developers had to put into programming stuff at the time, because they could rely on the complex, like the instructions.
Sorry to cut you off, but what you're describing sounds a lot like ARM. So, like, what is the difference between RISC-V and
We're getting there, yeah. So basically, now that I've clarified those two pieces, the complex and the RISC itself is what ARM uses, and by extension, M1, all of those ARM-based chips is using the reduced instruction set, which reduces the amount of stuff that the CPUs is creating, which basically means that it's a bit lower overhead. And because stuff is a lot faster now than it was, they can be lower overhead and have more of the stuff being handled internally, which is something that allows the RISC ones. This is why ARM stuff tends to have like better battery life, be more efficient, because of as part of that is because of that factor. And so where RISC-V kind of fits into this this area is that it is completely open source, which means that previously, if you wanted to make an ARM chip, you still have to pay ARM licensing fees. So Apple is paying ARM licensing fees to make its M1 chips, right? Qualcomm paying ARM. And then for x86, you have, everyone's there's actually, I can't remember if x86 is open source or not. I don't think it is. But they're either way. Basically, the other two ones I believe have are both they have fees, and by that extension, so ARM is costing like Apple like billions of dollars in licensing fees, right? So where RISC-V pops in is that it's basically an open source kind of ARM-esque entity. And why that's so interesting is because it's open source, a lot of different companies are able to take it and run with it, basically, which means that so for example, like Bitmain has made a RISC-V Monero miner. The K5 is using RISC-V chips, and because it's open source, they don't have to pay any licensing fees for that, and they can create and design their own chips for using RISC-V over the current standard like ARM and x86. So how that is kind of fits into this AI kind of perspective is that someone can now take a RISC-V chip and make a dedicated AI RISC-V chip, or make dedicated RISC-V AI hardware, etc., in order to compete against NVDA, etc. And there are actually companies that are already currently going into this process. So I was watching an interview with, I believe, Jim Keller, I believe that's his name. Let me make sure I'm not crazy. Yeah, Jim Keller. And his company at Tens Torrent. And Jim Keller is kind of a big deal because he was crucial in x86 and in AM. He worked at AMD, Apple, etc. And he's been pretty crucial throughout the whole process of making the AMD Athlon, which was extremely important because if I recall correctly, that's the first dual core processor. And then he was also part of the Apple A4, etc. So pretty important guy. Did a bunch of stuff. Hey, even worked at Tesla. So I just pulled up his Wikipedia page. I didn't know he worked at Tesla. But he's kind of a big deal. But he is now leading main member in Tens Torrent, which is developing these RISC-V software, hardware, etc., for specifically AI uses.
And that's really interesting. Do you think that we should be shorting ARM then? Like if it's really like ARM but it's open source and it's if it can be better, I'm not saying that it necessarily is, but if I'm Apple, right, and I'm paying ARM billions and billions of dollars every year on licensing fees because all my Macs run the latest ARM chips, then I think there's a huge incentive to switch to this open source where you don't have to pay anybody, right? So
exactly. Yeah. So I don't know if necessarily we need to short ARM because it's difficult to just transition things over, right? Because ARM has introduced its own contributions to their RISC architecture, right? So RISC-V is different from ARM's RISC. So it's not going to be a one-to-one ratio, right? But that being said, there is a pretty strong incentive for our good friends at Apple to try and transition to a RISC-V at some point. And even if they don't do it right now, and I'm not saying that this is something that's going to happen right away or take over from NVIDIA tomorrow or anything, but I think that there is a very real possibility that this becomes a additional area where there is a lot of growth, where we could be seeing competition back in the space with a new architecture. So it's definitely like when we were, the reason this came up was because we were talking about the dark horses coming up on NVIDIA, and Andy was mentioning like Intel and AMD, and I was kind of like, they're kind of in the light, because they're already actively trying to do AI stuff. But the real one in the dark that no one's heard about is like RISC-V, which is like actually the dark horse because it's coming in and no one knows about it.
Right, yeah, but okay, so maybe my counter to that is that like because it's open source, then maybe like there's not going to be a company like the equivalent of ARM, which is like the ARM's like mainly like they're basically all like just their income is basically all just licensing fees, right? So they develop the technology and they license to everybody, and then it's like their profit margins are over 90% because it's like they literally just sit there and collect these fees. So if you're a company that like is developing stuff based on this open source technology, then you can't really like actually make any money from the technology itself. Then you're gonna have to rely on like, I don't know, like actually building the chips, which maybe is more like hardware related, or I just, do you think that like the profit margins might not be as good just because it's open source?
Well, it's going to be a different profit model per se, but also I think that it's important to remember that companies like TSMC are making humongous amounts of money from the sale of CPUs, right, and chips themselves. So I think that it can be highly profitable regardless of the whether or not they're getting it from the licensing fees or from the software. It's not software, the licensing fees or the hardware. And also a big factor with this that is something that I haven't mentioned yet is the fact that since it's open source, the likelihood that Chinese companies that are being blocked, because there have been discussions to block Chinese companies from, getting access to chips made in other countries. This is an area where there's been a lot of development, a lot of work, and RISC-V could represent a way for China to develop its own chip industry without having to deal with licensing fees or any of the other countries that have previously been acting as kind of a barrier for China to participate in that market.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense. And like, I don't know, I'm coming from like a non-tech person's perspective, but it's just like when I first switched from like Intel computers to the M1 MacBook, that was a step change for me, at least, right? I think that like I was worried about like compatibility issues at first, but it turns out that like most of the things that I could do on like a regular computer with like Intel's x86, I could do on the M1, and it wasn't an issue. And there were only benefits because the battery life was like 3 times as long as an Intel laptop, and it was just way faster in general. And there's like the fan doesn't turn up, like even if I'm just like, because my old laptop, the fan would just spin when I'm watching YouTube. Like it literally, like I'm watching like a 1080p YouTube video and the fan would just spin up, right? Like the M1 doesn't do that. In fact, I don't think I've ever worked it enough for the fan to spin. Like I know, like I'm not even quite sure that it has a fan. I'm pretty sure it does because it's a MacBook Pro, but yeah, like I've never even heard it because like it literally doesn't produce like heat, or if it does, it's like very little compared to x86. But yeah, I mean, if there's something that could be done on the AI space where the step change is that big, then I think that it'll be like it'll usher in like a new generation of AI products and developments. But yeah, anyways, Dom, do you have anything you wanted to add to this?
No. Well, where's my mic? No, I think I'm good. Yeah, it's
Right.
all very interesting information. So.
Yeah, Tristan, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to encourage any viewers who are interested in this topic to go and watch the Linus Tech Tips videos on this, as well as Linus's WAN show interview with Jim Keller, because both of those were very interesting, and I think that will give a lot more context that maybe I have had some difficulty communicating, because this is a relatively complex topic, and I don't necessarily understand every piece that I'm referring to in its entirety. So listening to the people who have a much better idea of how all of this works would probably be very beneficial. So I'd be happy to think that I set some people on the path of learning more about this exciting new space.
Well, for me, you have me for one, right? So I'll definitely give that video a watch at the next available opportunity. All right. So if there's nothing more, why don't we wrap up for the day? Let me pass it to Dom for the outro.
Sweet. All right. So hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. So leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this main channel, as well as our clips channel. And that's it. Bye, guys.
Have a good one.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.